independence, that we all have these natural rights to life, liberty, and property. So, Ayn Rand, associated with this idea of so-called objectivism, argues that there is an objective reality, there's a real world out there, and there is an objective morality. We can discover what is clearly right and what is clearly wrong. So, for example, very different from the subjective theory of value. And so Rand argued that one of the things we know about human beings is they want to survive, they want to live. We know from historical experience that you survive, or human beings survive best when there's respect for natural rights. Therefore, we know that natural rights exist. Robert Nozick, wrote a famous book, Anarchy, State and Utopia, Harvard philosopher, he also believes in natural rights, but he doesn't take this objectivist approach to it. He argues that what we should do is that people's rational self-interest will exclude violent behavior. As I can talk more about the differences between, and who's interested, between these two different approaches to natural rights. So on the second question, why should government be limited? All natural rights, people agree, is because what does government do? It violates our rights. If it's immoral for one person to do something, why does it suddenly become moral for somebody else to be able to do something? It doesn't. So when somebody comes along and says, I'm going to take 25% of your income, and if you don't do it, I will put you in a cage, we would call that person a criminal. And the obvious question is, so why is it when the state comes along and says, we're going to take 25% of your income, and if you don't pay, we're going to put you in a prison, how is that any different? So they're saying the problem with the state is it violates our rights. And then when it comes to the third question, is that the role of government is again a minimal state, it exists to protect our rights. So Rand described this as a minimal state places force under objective control, and Nozick said to justify the minimum state against force, theft, fraud, and the enforcement of contracts. That can be justified, anything else cannot. It's sometimes summed up in the idea, the term he uses, you should allow capitalist acts between consenting adults. So in their view, there's a role, if you believe in natural rights, there's a role for the state to protect us, to have defense, police, courts, nothing else can be justified. And then the fifth school I want to look at is Murray Rothbard, David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, and anarcho-capitalism. Now Rothbard, he comes from the point of view of natural rights, and particularly famous for what he calls the non-coercive axiom. It is always wrong, he argues, to use violence except in self-defense. If you're attacked, you have a right to defend yourself. But otherwise it's always wrong to use violence. So that's his principle. You'll gather by the term non-coercive axiom that he gets that idea of axioms from Mises. So anyway, we don't get into too much detail. David Friedman is his father's son. He's a Chicago economist. For him, it's an empirical question what the government should do. But remember I said that Milton and the Chicago school, they tend to look at things and say, well, let's compare market failure versus government failure, and most of the time government failure is worse than the market, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes market failure is worse than the government, and therefore the government should do something. So David Friedman pursuing exactly the same methodology as his dad, but he says when you compare market failure with government failure is always worse than the market. So he doesn't say the market's perfect, he agrees with his dad, it's not perfect, But when you compare the two, he argues the market is always superior to government. When it comes to the question about what the role of why the government should be limited, on the one side you have people who are saying it impinges natural rights. On the other side you have the David Friedman people who are saying it's because it's always inefficient. It's always worse than leaving it to the market. So their conclusion is that yes, we should have a society where there is no government at all. Anarchy. They add anarcho-capitalist because so many anarchists are socialists. And they were okay, no, in their anarchist world, you would have, for example, private property. So again, they're not arguing that a world of anarchy is perfect. It's not. But it will be better than any form of government. And one argument they particularly use is, all right, supposing you end up with a minimal state, it won't stay minimal. It will grow and grow and grow and grow. So if you want to limit government, the only way to do that is to have anarchy. So what I've tried to do, and I realise it's a bit of a rush to cover so much ground in a short period of